the 23rd go down in our history as our Independence Day.
It's been 4 years since Britain voted to leave the EU. At the time, Boris Johnson stressed there was no rush.
There is now no need for haste.
But now, as Britain's Prime Minister, he's under a time crunch.
The faster we can do this, the better. Put a tiger in the tank.
Britain officially left the bloc in January, but talks on a trade agreement, remember one of the biggest issues of the Brexit debate, have made little progress. Johnson wants a loose trade deal, but the bloc is seeking much closer ties. For the EU's chief executive, Ursula von der Leyen, there will be no deal without three things.
Without fisheries, without a level playing field, or without strong governance mechanisms.
Let's take a closer look at those areas. When it comes to fishing, Britain wants to be able to keep selling British seafood to the 450 million people in the EU.
We've got to get a great deal for our fish. We're taking back control of our fish.
But EU fishermen want access to British waters. This trade-off between access to the EU market and British waters is at the heart of the dispute. When it comes to competition, Britain will no longer be bound by costly EU standards, such as on labour and environmental rules. EU officials believe this will give British companies an unfair advantage, and say similar standards must be upheld if Britain wants that easy access to their market. Finally, there's governance, and the need to create a way of settling future disputes. The EU can only accept its own top court, the Court of Justice of the European Union. But that's a red line for Johnson.
We can't have a system whereby we continue to have to obey EU law even when we're out of the EU.
So is all of this insurmountable, or are we facing a hard Brexit? Both sides have adopted a more conciliatory tone of late, agreeing for the greater need for creativity.
We will be able to respond to our economic needs in a creative and constructive way.
And we're ready to be creative, to find common ground where there even seems to be none.
Johnson and EU leaders say a deal is possible, but time is running out.
That we are now halfway through these negotiations with 5 months left to go. But we're definitely not halfway through the work to reach an agreement.
September has been referred to as the hot phase, with October being the more informal deadline for a deal. That would give just enough time for it to be ratified before the cliff edge at the end of the year. There were multiple extensions on the transition deal, but Johnson has said December 31st is a hard deadline.
But what we need now is to see a bit of oomph in the negotiations.